take mo fa seda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations. I am your host, Matterall. So this is our EVE Online podcast, and today we're going to cover some EVE Online stuff that we left behind when we were covering the major war that's happening all across New Eden right now. And this would include the conflict in Cache, which has Red Menace Coalition and Dream Fleet tangled up. We'll also talk about the Alliance Tournament and our viewing party with Carneros. And then later on, we will talk about the Onin Keepstar and the Mela Keepstar. And these are Sanctuary Keepstars. And we'll talk about the future in that project and all of that kind of stuff. And maybe we'll get some patch notes. So let's, this is going to be great because this is going to be what I always envisioned TIS should be, which is a group of guys and girls talking about EVE Online in a very casual way with coffee in the morning. So let's have that kind of show. All right, we'll start with Carneros. How are you doing?
Good morning. My voice is a little hoarse after yesterday's party, but I had a great time. Thank you.
It was a great party. I think we have some pictures of that. Artemis Albosa, how's it going, buddy?
Does Diet Coke count as coffee?
It works.
If it does, then we're
Yes.
good. Yeah. Younger generation, I guess. And of course, Dirk McGurk.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How's it going?
All right, we have one guest today, which we're happy to have, and this is Hugh Kaswak from NER.
Hi, everybody. For me, it's actually sort of early evening, but I'm very glad to be here.
For our listeners who don't know what the NER is, could you explain that, sir?
Sure. So we're a new media site trying to have some good nature competition with INN, In24, CZ, etc., where we try to focus on very neutral and straight news reporting.
First rule of branding. Say it for us. What is NER?
Oh, of course, yeah. The New Eden Report. Although we've actually struggled with that. Some of our syndicated columnists have been calling us the New Eden Register. So we're going to look into that one.
Oh, good to see the difference there and the thought that goes into it.
I like just casually throwing shade at their competition by saying that their focus is unbiased media.
I think that a whole bunch of different media outlets make the game more interesting. And it would be wrong of me to say that we should only have absolutely straight news. And I know for one thing, we don't always succeed in that.
So are you trying to be the MSN or the Fox?
We're trying to be the Reuters or BBC, actually. But,
nice answer.
We're working on trying to improve our branding, so yeah.
Well, do we want to come back to that? Because it actually came up a little bit this week and got a little bit of traction. But I don't know if you want to do it now, or I don't know if you want to do it later.
Let's do it now.
We're already sort of there right now. I mean, yeah, look, Doom Chinchilla came out with a tweet the other day that was talking about the fact that NER was biased. I think he was pointing to the fact that it was biased in favor of the Imperium or whatever. And there were a couple of us that were going back and forth with them on Twitter. Look, this whole idea of there being bias in the EVE media goes back a long ways, right? Pretty much some group out there will always point at some other group out there and say that their version of things were biased. And Matterall, we've talked about this a lot over the years, especially when you were the EVE bureau chief for the Mittani.com and INN later on after that. The fact that none of these sites really kind of have they don't really have the ability to be truly biased because they don't have enough writers. They don't direct from the top down what should be written and how it should be written. These are all mainly like user submissions, and you sort of take what you can get. There's such a dearth of writers out there that you can't even try to be biased on that level.
Well, I think that the perceived bias comes from the choice in what stories do you tell and what stories don't you tell. What do you highlight and what don't you highlight? Like, there is some choice and decision making there.
There is, but you kind of have to remember that like these reporters are not like being paid real life paychecks, right? You can't really direct somebody to go out and write about something that they don't want to write about. So you end up getting articles from people based on what it is that they want to write about most of the time.
And who wants to write about the conflict, the winners or the losers?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely get that. I mean, I know every one of these sites out there because they've all been accused of bias in their own way. I mean, when Eve News 24 was really the only, let's call it, multi-writer, main news site, right? Back in the day, and everything else was kind of bloggers and and other forms of communication. They were accused of bias. When TMC came through, obviously just with the name thematani.com in it, and then Imperium News later on and whatnot, right? There's the idea of bias that comes in there. Crossing Zebras, was also accused of bias in its own way, and you tend to have these sort of like social circles that people who want to be contributors tend to run in, and they go to the site that they tend to be more socially coordinated with, let's say. So therefore, on Imperium News, you're going to get a lot more stories that are from writers who are in the Imperium. You're going to go to another site where it's like most of their people come from a different angle, and therefore maybe write about PL or NC or what it is they're doing more. It would be great if what we had was just one big giant thing, which in a way you can kind of call just Eve Media in general, where in aggregate we do get stories from all over, but no one particular site is so balanced because they just can't get the writers. They can't get the writers from these other social circles.
Well, I mean, at the moment with NER, we've got a fairly interesting mix of people. If you're going to accuse us of any one group, it's probably Initiative News, actually. But we've got a fair set of writers from what is now Dead Coalition, which is my home coalition, and also from the Imperium. One of the things we do to try and deal with the challenge, as Dirk says very rightly, that ultimately people write what they want, is that we try to get a more group-focused writing process set up. For example, the 1900 News a couple of days ago, Brisk Rubal wrote some of that, Initiative, Sedal and Test wrote some of that, and I wrote some of that. So that's our way of trying to get around it. But absolutely, it's a pretty serious challenge.
Is it serious?
Well, I mean, partly it's right because I enjoy role-playing as a BBC reporter, so I hope it is serious. But I think that to some extent, spin makes things that much harder to understand, and it's great fun reading them.
Well, spin's different than bias, I think. They're two different things.
Yeah, that's very true.
Hang on. Can you elaborate on that?
Intentionality.
Who are you talking to?
I mean, come on, a single word is not elaborating on a concept.
Okay, so bias means not examining your slant and not accounting for it and just going through it unconsciously. Whereas spin means you're looking at the situation and you're presenting it in the best possible light for your narrative that's still plausible in some way to and digestible by the audience. Is that unfair?
I think that's I think you did a great job. Yeah, of course. Like spinning also seems to have intent, and bias can not have intent. It can just be a state that you're in. It's a position you come from. It's an angle it's assumptions you already make. For instance, I was talking to Kurt from NER, who I like very much. And one of the things what we were talking about was there was something he wrote about bias and how they try not to be biased. But he said, and so like, this is especially true during World War B. And I was like, this is an article about bias, and you used a name that is controversial. And he said, and he basically said, like, well, no, that's the uncontroversial name. That's the name that makes the most amount of sense. That's the one that's accepted by everybody. Now, Kurt is a great guy. I don't think he understands that title was almost as big as the war itself, as far as fighting over its meaning, how CCP adopted it and should or shouldn't have, and all the stuff that followed, because World War B was almost more a propaganda war than it was an actual war.
Yeah, well, I've struggled with that a fair bit. I'm not sure if I should be calling it World War B or the Casino War, or whether I should try and call it like the sort of Goonswarm eviction or whatever, and whether that actually makes it
That's-
for both worlds.
That last one's probably the one that makes the most sense. If you don't want to be putting a definition on it that can be grasped by anybody, just say what it was. Like, this is, I know that
We're in the North 92C.
No, the war that evicted Goonswarm is totally legitimate but I don't know if that's a title. That's the thing. And so,
Has Goonswarm been evicted more than once?
yeah, they've lost their space more
So
than
then
once.
that's a rather ineffective title.
Well, yeah, if you put a date stamp on it, I guess. But no, they were. I don't think they were evicted from the North, though. So, and I don't think it's an effective title because it's a description. But that is kind of a legitimate, like, that actually happened. There's nobody that can dispute that. That happened.
I mean, World War B is a particularly stark issue on the topic of bias, because you had, as I understand it, from what I hear from people who were in Goonswarm at the time, or their allies, the Imperium, quote unquote, is that they were actively being dissuaded from browsing Reddit. On the other side, the people who were attacking the Imperium were actively using Reddit. That was like the most popular source of news. That's where they hung out. That's where they talked about Eve. And so you had just a complete line in the sand from where people got their sources of information. So anybody who is part of the Money Badger Coalition, probably the majority of the rest of Eve, because r/Eve is universal, I think, ish, as far as who goes there, barring the Imperium at the time. So everybody called it World War B on r/Eve, but Goons didn't, because Goons were dissuaded from going to r/Eve. That's my understanding. I'd love to hear if that's like Carneros, if you're on the inside, if you have a different opinion.
Well, obviously, I'm not a goon, and
Obviously,
but I will point out that Goonswarm wasn't the only alliance evicted. There were probably 8 alliances that were evicted, some of which have nothing to do anymore with the Imperium. And then there was, but in terms of r/Eve, I will admit I actively discouraged my members from going to r/Eve, and I still do. I think Reddit is a cesspool and should be avoided.
Well,
I'm a
I
different
actively
generation
discourage human
from you.
beings from going to Reddit, but what?
Yes.
Dirk walks the walk because he doesn't have a Reddit account. Like, even I do that.
Oh God, no, I can't have a Reddit. And look, there are a lot of good there are a lot of good people over on Reddit. Eve. I'm sure that there are. I'm sure that there are some good people on Reddit. But yeah, it's just I'm not a big fan of forums to begin with. But yeah, I do want to swing this back, not so much because this will be the 112th time that we've talked about kind of the naming of that particular war and how it takes on both sides and whatnot. But I do want to swing back to the idea of bias, because I think that having singled out New Eden Report, Doom Chinchilla was obviously being biased in his own right, and would probably freely admit to being one of the more biased individuals out there with kind of the stuff he tends to talk about. But this is something that goes on for so long, and I don't know. As somebody who tries to read articles based on what the merit of the article is and not care what the banner is over the top, right? I know that we're always going to have some bias out there. A lot of it unintentional. It's just based on the fact that we have a dearth of writers that are producing content in that way. I don't think that even with an organization like Imperium News, right? They would love to have writers from other points of view contributing to that, right? It was as I was trying to say to Doom the other day. The best way of countering your perceived bias is to ensure that there are other voices that are speaking. They don't even have to be on the same site. If you think NER is somehow biased, then write a rebuttal to that from Crossing Zebras or Eve News 24 or a blog out there or something, right? Just get the content out. But that takes effort, and it's a lot easier to sit there and say somebody's biased than it is put effort into putting out a voice, whether it be through a podcast, whether it be through a show, or whether it be through an article.
There's one thing I find pretty interesting is that when Doom was saying that on Twitter, he was echoing comments made a week earlier by Tuzzy, who's the head of Goonswarm's logistics division, in the other direction. Tuzzy said on Reddit that NER is, I think, like false equivalency. It always slants towards NCPL. So I think that's maybe an interesting wrinkle on it, is that actually when you try to be neutral, obviously that you're going to benefit from that, but also you do end up with a situation wherein both sides can attack you. Another thought on that bias kind of issue you bring up is I think EVE players often don't trust people to be wrong, almost. I mean, when I make mistakes in articles, and I do a lot of the time, I am told I am biased or spinning. Actually, I'm just making a mistake a lot of the time. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that one as well.
Sometimes, a carrot is just a carrot. But the thing is, it's not. I think where the confusion is, or where there's a lot of subtext going on. So when you're using the language of people that you've talked to over time to learn stuff, when you use the same language they use, that language itself is detected by the opposing team. In assumptions in titles and assumptions in like names, assumptions in intent, those get translated as, oh, they're getting their news from our enemy, and our enemy is feeding them, or whatever. I think that's where it comes from on the Imperium side. That's just what I think happens. On the other side, I have no idea why people think that you guys are biased against PL. Like that just, I just thought that was a joke.
Yeah, I was a bit taken aback by Doom's tweeting.
It could be cover, like flak, you shoot it over there so that people say, oh, they are neutral because we don't like them on either side. It could just be flak to...
I mean, it could be. I mean, if it is, it's not something we're coordinating.
No, of course not. And you guys, there's one thing that should be said, is you guys try for objectivity. And that's I think that's a noble goal, because you're trying to service all the EVE players, not any one particular group. This is almost like tar on media. You just can't get out of it. It's always going to be on you. And the harder you try to say, we're not, the harder people will find examples where you make a mistake. So there's no winning this whole argument.
Yeah, that's very true.
But if you do want to hear, an opposing view of I don't know, get those people out there that are willing to. I'm not talking to NER here or any other ones. I'm talking to the listeners, right? It's like, get some people out there that'll write more content, that will produce more of that. So that differing views are presented at the time. I don't think anybody should expect that any of these organizations are literally, Reuters or the BBC or anything like that. Nobody's winning a Space Pulitzer on this. Nobody's getting paid to write about something completely objectively and all that, right? This is a hobby attached to a hobby. This is, so I mean, nobody should be expecting that the highest levels of journalistic integrity are being upheld. This is the EVE media. Number one, we want some propaganda involved with it. We probably do want some bias in it, because it makes it kind of fun.
Well, I would push back on that point there, and I think Hugh is a great example, where some of these writers, some of these reporters, if you will, they're putting, it's like their personal touch onto the thing is how unbiased it is. It's their work that they're putting out there under their name or pseudonym, which may even be more important nowadays. So there is a certain level of personal stake in having their work being valued apart from just their side likes it because it makes them look good.
I mean, to a certain extent, yes, I enjoy it. And I'm sure it's the same for everyone else.
That was my question to you. Are you enjoying it?
I mean, yes, there are certain days when I'm looking at sort of 40 pings, being like, I have to write this up, don't I? Oh, no. But on the whole, it's a really interesting thing to do, and I do really enjoy it. And I think a lot of that is trying to be neutral, because, even the sort of attempt to be objective is itself a little mini game I have to play on wording and language, as Matterall says.
Yeah, and it's not easy. You're always going to get called out for it or whatever. But if you're trying it, internally, you feel good about it. I think that's really cool that you're actually trying for objectivity, and trying to really just do a service for a lot of people that either can't play or have stopped playing. but are still interested in it, or people who are curious about EVE Online, there's not much they can do except read stuff like the stuff that you write. And that's really why a lot of people, I think, should be commended for writing EVE stuff, for doing podcasts like we're doing. All this stuff is what people, it's a reflection of EVE. And we look at it and try to say, look, this is a very interesting game. Look at how fascinated we are with it. And we're all like intelligent grown men. Or at least I am. I don't know about Dirk over there. You're
I
a
don't
grown
know.
man.
He uses Twitter, so.
He is a grown man. You're not firing back, Dirk. It's no fun.
Oh, sorry. I was responding to something out in Twitch chat. My bad.
All right. Dead horse. Let's move
Anyway,
on.
yeah.
It's a
Go
dead
ahead,
horse until the next time
wrap it up.
until the next time it comes up, because again it will always come up, and I'm always just grateful for the number of people that we still have continuing to try and do this, right? That there are some stories out there being written, even if there is, even if there's intentional bias being put into it, at least something's being written, and then if you really care enough about it, you can look into it deeper. I'm not expecting anybody out there to be completely 100% unbiased and neutral, just simply from the fact of I think we're asking too much from kind of hobbyist journalists here.
Okay, last point on this, and there's actually 2 points. One is we are doing a little roundtable of media coverage of Virtual Worlds that Carneros helped me with, which is terrific, and it will be coming out this week. We're editing it as a video. It has Andrew Groen and Stephen Mesner from PC Gamer. It was a fascinating discussion, right, Carneros?
That was huge fun. I had a great time. I think you'll enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, it was quite fun. And it does cover this media and why it's important to cover Virtual Worlds and stuff like that. So look forward to that coming up pretty soon. Again, our Patreons already saw the raw footage, but it's being cut together and we'll put it out. The second thing is that INN itself is looking for writers outside of the Imperium. The thing is, INN can, or the Imperium Mittani can send out a ping to the Imperium group and say, hey, we need more writers, or we need more of this, we need more of that. And a ton of people come back and say, yeah, I want to help out. But that's not necessarily what the mission of the place is. The mission of the place is to kind of serve all of EVE Online. So there's a real effort now to make sure that people know that writers can come from anywhere. It's not a closed shop. There's no doctrine. It's a matter of coming in and feeling if you want to write for the place, if you have something to say, if you want to do some research and put out an article, that is something that that's the kind of person they look for. It's not a doctrine or dogma or anything like that. But and NER too, I'm sure that they are always looking for writers, but let me not speak for you.
Yeah, no, we absolutely are. And Reddit's been a great source of that, but so has the rest of the community. So, yeah.
And really, at the end of it all is we're all doing the same stuff, and that is putting out stuff that people can read, that enjoy reading about EVE, even if they're not playing. But speaking of volunteer efforts, the Alliance Tournament.
They did a great job with that whole broadcast. The whole tournament was really, really well done. It was impressive.
Yeah, who wants to tackle Alliance Tournament? Because it just finished.
I want to start with their set was great. Their set was great. Their production values, everything they set up was really, really good. The presenters were great. The pacing of the show was great. The last few matches were great. If you weren't watching, the last three teams came down to triumvirate, Hydra and Vidra. So Hydra Reloaded and Vidra Reloaded.
Yeah, I thought the commentators were dressed really well. Like they really.
Other than an inability to apparently snug their ties up a little.
Well, it's a look.
Like incredibly hot.
Yeah, they did all. They did all dress pretty. Pretty well this year. Jin didn't go with a gold suit, at least. At least in the final day there. But No, I mean, I just want to reiterate what Carnero said. I mean, the production value is extremely high here. I don't think that you can look at this and say that you lost anything in terms of the production quality of the coverage of the tournament here. In fact, I think you got more. I think they actually brought some kind of better analytical graphics to the to the stage this year than even CCP had done in the past. So.
There were some off-color jokes as well.
I did hear those. I haven't seen those for like 10 or 12 years. I thought there was a couple of dumb mistakes, probably there was at least one by Bart, the NC guy. Sexual innuendo just doesn't fit with the Alliance tournament. Is that what you're talking about? Or am I onto something else?
Yeah, but I was being more discreet about it.
Yeah, that's just dumb. I'll be less discreet. There's a lot of people watching, maybe people sharing it with their kids. Like, you don't need sexual innuendo for that.
Yeah,
They're all
you just
nerds.
need a suit with weed plastered all over it. That'll work great.
I didn't say that was a great suit. Did he have that suit on?
Not this year.
But yeah, I don't think
Not
that
really.
kind of. Well, anyway, in some states, kids can be exposed to that, I suppose. But I don't know. It just doesn't fit in. They did that, I think, like in 2007 or 2008 or something. Anyway, and that was really out of place. But whatever.
It happens. I don't think that it kind of overdid it. It didn't carry on throughout the whole thing. It wasn't like an always kind of on sort of sideshow or anything. I think that when you've got people that are that are rambling as many words as they are during some of these things, and sometimes she'll slip out. But overall, I think it was really well covered. Props to Vidra for I suppose instead of just talking about the
Coverage.
Coverage itself, which is really top. Props to Vidra. Or however the hell they were pronouncing it yesterday. Which is it Vidra? Is it Vidra? I mean, like, it looks like Vidra to me. I'm sorry. I feel
It's
like
based off of Hydra, right?
Yeah,
it's based
exactly.
off.
It's not Hydra, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, props to them. Props to Try for doing really well, getting as far as they did. They went down 2-1 there in the losers bracket. And then of course it went down to Hydra A and B, and apparently B won. I don't know. Vidra won.
Oh, okay,
So
so
props to them.
Vidra isn't a pronunciation from the Russian side of things.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so maybe that's where it comes from. Thank you, Bard Ghost.
Majority of the pilots on Vidra are Russian, right?
I think somebody explained the difference between Hydra and Vidra. We'll call him Vidra just for distinction. And there was a Russian component to it. I can't speak to it well enough. Somebody here, did anyone know?
Well, I do know that the pilots, 2 of the pilots at least, put out fantastic content on YouTube and stream on Twitch for years now. And I do know that they are Russian. About the rest of the team's composition, I'm unfamiliar.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, but I'm not sure. I thought somebody here asked that question.
Apophany, yeah. And Apophany gave me the answer the other day over at Talking in Station Discord, but it's now so far up in public that I can't find it right now.
You didn't absorb it, huh?
I didn't absorb it. And this is why I ask the same question every year. I'm like, can somebody tell me what the relationship is between Hydra and Vidra again? Because I know that there was something. And
yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's all right. We'll get to the bottom of it, but they won the tournament, right?
I do want to give a shout out to one of our boys, Apophany. Okay, and there is some rumor that he may be taking a hiatus from Eve following the Alliance tournament. I hope he can make it back for maybe one more show, just to give us his breakdown, because he really is so sharp with the analysis and the history of the Alliance tournament, that he is one of the premier talkers about it out there, and it's really sad that we're sitting here doing such an injustice to kind of everything but the coverage of it, because he is so sharp at it. So I do hope he comes back and kind of just gives a quick rundown for us, maybe as to not just the tournament itself, but also his experience with with the last few weeks of covering it on behalf of Event and that group.
Yeah, there's also your colleague Chocolate Rain that did a good job, I think, being up there.
Yep. She's on a flight net right now, coming back because she doesn't have enough paid time off to stay an extra day.
Oh, that's
Terrible
such,
American vacation.
such dedication from people to suffer like that. Speaking of
vacation,
Speaking of dedication, though, and this is a good transition because we just saw Kenneth Feld, who actually explained his name finally, which is very interesting. It's the owner of Barnum and Bailey's circus, because his first character was the name of a lion tamer. So his first character was in Eve as the lion tamer. And then and he's an industrialist, right? He builds all this stuff. So he obviously got alts to start maximizing production. So then his character that he made that runs the production is the owner of the circus. And that's where he gets the name Kenneth Feld.
brilliant.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. But he flew all the way out from, South Carolina?
He was amazing to meet.
To San Diego just to hang out and watch the Alliance tournament with Carneros' group.
Yeah, this was the fourth time we have met to watch the Alliance tournament together. And we normally meet once a month anyway in San Diego. So this time we switched it from some little dodgy gay bar that would open up early in the morning for us to the barbecue place where we normally have our meetings. And that turned out to be a good choice. And we had 27 people show up. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Lady Scarlet was there.
When you said Kenneth flew out there, like I thought that he flew out there for some other reason and it just happened to coincide. But you said later today that no, he flew out there just for from the East Coast to the West Coast just for that.
Hotel room, rent a car, whole deal.
Good for him.
And it's not like he has no life and had nothing better to do. It's that the guy for work just flies so much that this to him was like a taxi ride. There are people who taking a flight across the country is just no big deal. And all that stuff was on points, and it's just like, so it doesn't cost them a lot of money to do this kind of a thing. But it's amazing that, it's amazing that you're motivated to do that, to meet other Eve players and stuff. I think that's pretty cool. Like, you'll see it if you go to Eve Vegas, if you go to FanFest, go to Eve Down Under, or any, the Amsterdam, any of these, or even in England, you'll see that when people get together, they just love being around each other and talking about the thing they have in common and they really like. It's a pretty easy crowd if you're an Eve player to talk with Eve players.
I think the next event up is G Fleet in Berlin.
Yep.
And that's pretty close. Hopefully, if you're German or near Germany, you know about that.
In September.
Yeah, and they just had one in Ireland too, not long ago. I think it was just a couple of weeks ago. Eve Dublin, yeah, that would have been fun. I might have flown to that one. But Carneros, tell us about the party, because I thought that was like a lot of fun. We stayed for a while.
Yeah, they opened up the place an hour early and served breakfast and beverages. I was drinking champagne. We put the game up on the stream up on the monitors and we were watching it, and we'd stop and talk to each other in between, and we'd go back to watching the matches. We'd explain things to each other. There are a few people in the group who haven't been actively logging in lately and didn't know what a Leshak was or a Praxis, and we had to explain a few things as we went. But, and some people who, didn't necessarily know some of the nuances of the coverage, such as when there's an ECM symbol, that's a jam attempt. But then you can look up at the control bars to maybe guess what percentage of the attempts were actually valid and things by looking at how green the bar was and things like that. We would talk through some of the nuances for people who didn't maybe know it all, and it was a lot of fun. We ended up sitting there for hours and hours afterwards. I think we spent 8 hours in that bar before we left. People ordered lunch after breakfast.
See, there you go.
Yeah, I stayed later, unfortunately, because we stayed late because we were the last ones to go, but also there was the little issue of I left my car lights on.
Oh dear Lord, I missed that.
Well, hold on. You left your car lights on and your battery was dead?
Totally. And I have a stick shift, but I wasn't about to, have Gobbins push it and then jump it. That wasn't going to happen. So
That's what all those Eve nerds are there for, man.
that's right. All that muscle, right? No, there was only Life Shifter that was there, but he's a huge guy. He's really strong. So that didn't matter because we just charged off his battery. But it was a comedy of errors for like the next 2 hours. As one thing after another started to go wrong. But then we hung out and we talked, and it was pretty cool. We were talking about streaming and talking about other stuff other than Eve. And it ended up being a really nice way to kind of drift into the evening, and then we drove home, and it was uneventful after that. But that was a lot of fun, and Carneros was up there talking to people. I'm sorry, pointing at the screen and describing the screen. And I actually learned a lot and I'm not sure it gets described well enough, but I learned a lot by watching Carneros say, you see, this is what they're attempting to do over here. And he shows the symbols. And then he would say, but this is the success rate up here. And I just had never put that together. So it was great to have Carneros there kind of guiding us through how to watch the tournament as well.
You see the control bar going up here?
Yeah. I didn't know what that meant. I guess I do now when I think about it. Yeah. But really good time.
That meet did get a shout out on the broadcast because there were also a couple other specific viewing parties that were going on right up in Iceland. They were having one at the bar down below CCP's office for people who were in the Iceland area, and of course you had the main one there in the UK, and I think there was another one. I can't remember where that. But you guys definitely got a shout out on the stream.
Oh, did we? Yeah.
Nice.
My commercial, McLeod made a commercial of me mispronouncing names, which happens. And that was when that was played, I got a little bit of razzing from the local crowd there. It's pretty funny. But the Alliance tournament, you can kind of go back and see the brackets, see who won, see maybe when we get Apothly on here, you can do a wrap up of some of the highlights and stuff like that. But at this point, just want to say that it was a really nice production. Congratulations to all the teams, all the players. I think Northern Coalition got 4th place behind Triumvirate, got 3rd. So it was nice to see our teams do well. But it was awfully nice to talk with Lady Scarlet and with Kenneth Feld, with Gobbins, and all the guys that showed up there in San Diego. That was a lot of fun. Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so let's actually get some news here, which would be good for people who want to catch up on what's been going on besides the stuff between Imperium and NC in the north, or PL and Legacy in the south, or now it's kind of mixed. So let's actually talk to Artemis and Hugh about the cache conflict and what's going on there.
Yeah, so there are actually 3 semi-distinct but all mutually related conflicts going on in the southeast right now. Well, right now, and as of a few months in the past as well. I think it's probably useful to start with the conflict that's been going on in Great Wildlands. Just summarize it real quick, introduce a few players. Full disclosure, I'm biased. Alexiev Card, old CEO of mine, runs cans. I joined their corp this morning. So
oh, wow.
That's the point of view I'm coming from. I also flew with them in some of the fights of this conflict. But essentially, there was a power vacuum that was created when a coalition of sorts disbanded. And Ebola stepped up to the plate to fill it and decided to send out legitimate Eve mails to everybody in the region, letting them know that they were the new top dog and they were coming for them. And this essentially motivated all of these smaller groups to band together, start fighting back together, and they actually started winning. They started picking up money moons, killing structures, winning fights, and it's worth noting that Ebola really likes to use caps. They drop them quite prolifically, and so this enabled the smaller groups to entice bat phones, if you will, larger entities from the neighboring regions, to come over and join in on the fight so they could get some Ebola cap kills. And so that's actually, all this conflict resulted in a coup happening within Ebola. You probably saw the Reddit post. It'll be linked in the show notes for the podcast listeners. there was a coup that happened within Ebola. The alliance is effectively split. Ebola still remains with some members, and now there's this new group. I forget what they're called. I feel dumb, but they exist now. They're trying to live in the same space as Ebola. And so the region is effectively devolved into now you have a bunch of small entities. The majority of them are sort of neutral to each other. They'll work together, but they'll also fight each other. And then there's Ebola and the new offspring of Ebola. And an interesting note is that one of the groups, which was sort of a bat phone, sort of aligned with these small groups who were banding together to fight back Ebola, was Unspoken Alliance. And recently, Unspoken Alliance decided to introduce the fact that they were no longer going to be neutral with the Great Wildlands small organizations, if you will, by trying to drop a Macarial fleet who was reinforcing an Ebola Athenor. So this stirred up a bunch of nonsense, a lot of drama going on. But it's interesting because Unspoken Alliance is a major player in the Ethereum Reach conflict, which you knows way more than I do about.
Well, you say that. I was just arguing with somebody about the West Wing. Yeah, so the Ethereum Reach conflict, essentially, we're seeing this kind of actually still fairly stalemated war between the Ethereum Breach Coalition, because of course they like to name their coalition in the least confusing way possible, and the Russian-speaking Prothean Alliance. Now, one thing I'd like to add is most of my sources are with Ethereum Breach because they speak English and I don't speak Russian, and our translator was moving house, so I haven't had a chance to really have a long chat with Prothean Alliance. The kind of thing about the Ethereum Reach conflict is it's actually just the old DRF. Like the rest of the DRF fell, XIX fell, but Prothean Alliance just hasn't moved, and so they're still fighting. What we're seeing now is a kind of a frozen conflict where Ethereum Breach owns the south of the region, essentially, and Prothean Alliance owns the north of the region, and they're intertosing back and forth. We're also seeing now coming to aid Ethereum Breach, which is Unspoken Alliance, Bow Down, and Just a Game, so sort of low sec and null sec PvPers. We're now seeing Centipede Caliphate has also come to help them up from Tenerifus. And Prothean Alliance itself has enjoyed some support from Dreamfleet, as kind of like that overlaps, of course, into what Artemis is talking about to some extent. Well, sorry, say again, what Artemis will be talking about. And also Brothers of Tangra, which I think is NC.'s renting organization, if Matt was that right?
You caught me. I was trying to catch up.
Oh, sure, no. Brothers of Tangra, that's the NC. renting?
Yeah, BOT. I can't say who it belongs to. I'm pretty sure it belongs to NC now. It did belong to PL.
Okay, yeah. So a more general sort of Panvam situation.
It might even be a blend in some way.
Yeah, I think it's
Joint venture.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, just ask Lady Scarlet. That's how we solve this problem.
I know myself. I just don't know if I'm able to like say what I know. So I say I can't be certain in public.
Yeah, that's reasonable, to be honest. We're also apparently Prothean Alliance has been mining and crabbing in Pandemic Horde space. So that's pretty interesting. So I think it's a very interesting conflict, a bit like Great Wildlands, because you're seeing all these small gang conflict going on, but there's also this looming potential of a great power clash between PanFam making Prothean their puppets, and the Ethereum Breach, who have worked in the past with the Holy League. So it's something I think that's worth keeping an eye on. And of course, I mentioned Dreamfleet, which feeds into the cash conflict. So
yeah, so the cash conflict is fantastic from a drama point of view. Like, it is just amazing the amount of stuff that has gone on that nobody knows about because everybody who's involved speaks Russian. And so the vast majority of Western media there's no access to it. Fortunately, Matterall hooked me up with a guy who hooked me up with a guy, and so I've got some information. The majority of it is coming from the side of Dreamfleet. And so effectively the story is that around the time when Triumvirate lost their Keepstar, when they were fighting with DRF, Red Menace Coalition, which for all intents and purposes of this discussion, is Dreamfleet and Red Alliance. They started taking Sovereign cash, and they did this as a result of a bit of a budding friendship with Triumvirate and Fraternity. And so they took Sovereign cash. They also have Sovereign period basis, which is directly south of Delve. So Red Menace Coalition was blue, or is still blue, with the Imperium, as I understand it. And so you had this weird case where there was an alliance who has Sov in Delve, basically southeast, suddenly jumping across the map, skipping Catch, skipping all those interim Providence, etc., taking Sov and Cash. And their standings created a bit of an issue there as well. And Dreamfleet saw this. Dreamfleet had their numbers bolstered by Solar Fleet basically dissolving, so they gained a couple of corps there. And they took stock, and they looked at it, the situation. They decided that they really just wanted to live in Cash. That's where they wanted to make their home. They had people who had lived there in the past. It was sort of their ancestral lands, if you will. And so they decided whatever they have to do, they want to live in Cash. And the best course of action, they determined, was to cut ties with the Imperium, because they knew that the neighbors around Cash was the Holy League. It was Triumvirate, Fraternity, etc., who were very much aligned against Legacy, which the Imperium just blued. And it's also worth noting that the majority of Red Menace Coalition, Red Alliance included, have a history of enjoying to fight with Test. So Imperium bluing Legacy, which one of the main alliances is Test Alliance, please ignore, creates some issues there. So
by the way, bluing is a standings change, which means that you are allies.
Yeah, good point. And you usually don't shoot each other, usually. But so this created a bit of an issue. Dreamfleet just decided, okay, we want to live in Cash in order to get along with our neighbors, avoid standing issues, and continue to fight Test, which is a nice bonus. We're going to break ties with the Imperium. They did this on good standings, and they effectively left Red Menace Coalition. But then they have the issue of they still have control of roughly half the Sov in period basis, and they have control of roughly half the Sov in Cash. The other half is essentially controlled by Red Alliance, still a member of Red Menace Coalition, still blue with the Imperium, as I understand it, very close ties with Goon Swarm in specific. And so they went into negotiations. They tried to figure out, hey, can we do a one-to-one swap? You get our Sov in period basis, we get the Sov in Cash, everybody's happy.
Makes sense to me.
Well, it made sense to them, but agreements didn't work out. They couldn't come to an arrangement. There were some alternatives put up, but at the end of the day, what was decided by the leadership within Dreamfleet was they're just going to fight for it. I mean, why not? This is Eve after all. So they went to war, started fighting. And an interesting thing to note here is that not everyone within Dreamfleet was happy about the decision. Not everyone wanted to fight with Red Alliance. Obviously, they've been your allies for who knows how long. There are going to be some interpersonal friendships going on there. And one individual in particular and his corporation, Loriana Lee, was the person who is named that I've gotten from multiple sources as the individual who did not want to fight with Red Alliance. And it was generally understood that they were going to be leaving Dreamfleet after the Alliance tournament. But on July 20th, they decided enough was enough, I guess, and disbanded Dreamfleet. As a result of EVE mechanics, that meant that Dreamfleet lost all of their Sov in period basis and in Cash. Moreover, there's a 24-hour waiting period to form an alliance and get everybody in there. So they had no way to get that Sov back. Red Alliance scooped all of it up. This, of course, resulted in Dreamfleet being kicked out of the Alliance tournament, by the way. So that happened. This completely flips the momentum of this war. Now Dreamfleet is completely on the back foot. They do still have the majority of control over their structures, in particular a Keepstar within Cash. They had sold off most of their assets in period basis, so there wasn't much worry there, but they did lose all that Sov, and they lost a big bargaining chip. So that's how this war was going. This flip happened. They reformed as Dreamfleet Dot in all capital letters, which is nice and confusing. And their ticker, by the way, is DRF, not Drone Regions Federations. A bunch of people get confused. DRF, the ticker, stands for Dreamfleet, not Drone Region Federation. So that was the case. That's what's going on. They've been fighting with Red Alliance, and generally it seems like they were losing for a while. They were losing fleet fights. They've been losing structures throughout August, even still. But there was a massive fight, which is what keyed me into this conflict, where they were defending their Keepstar, and they actually successfully defended the Keepstar in cash. So Dream Fleet lost all their Sov, Alliance disbanded, had to reform, lost a key piece of Alliance leadership in an FC, and they still were able to save this Keepstar. Huge battle happened, super interesting. The battle report will be linked in the show notes, hopefully. And so they're still fighting over it, and they're starting to now fight in the Ethereum Reach conflict because, number one, they like to fight. This is EVE after all. And number two, some allies of Red Menace Coalition are fighting in the Ethereum Reach conflict. So, I mean, if you can fight against your enemy somewhere else, it might as well be your war from their perspective. So that's basically the situation. You've got Dreamfleet Dot. Their alliance was disbanded. They want to live in cash. They lost all their Sov. Now they're trying to get it back. They were losing. They've recently been having some fights where they're winning. In particular, they killed a Red Alliance Titan as a result of a failed work save. So that's interesting. They've been bat phoning, which I thought was crazy. They bat phoned Snuffed Out, a member of the Imperium, to fight against Red Alliance, who's a part of Red Menace Coalition, who is blue with the Imperium. And from that, I discovered that Snuffed Out has an interesting arrangement with Imperium standings. Perhaps Carneros can shed some more light, or we'll just leave it vague for various reasons. But essentially, Snuffed Out doesn't really uphold the nebulous affiliations of the Imperium. They shoot whoever they want to, basically, as long as it's not directly goons or goon related.
That doesn't match what I see, but I will admit freely that I don't understand all the Russian-speaking parts of the relationships at all. Whenever it's a Russian-related group and the Imperium diplomats come to us and say, you should adjust your standings, I just nod and say, I should adjust my standings. And I do whatever they say because I don't understand it any. And so, I'm not going to go in and argue with what they're saying.
Gotcha. However,
I in the interactions I've had with Snuff, which have all been on the west side of the map, they've seemed like a normal member of the Imperium. They just are a little bit more independent, like the Initiative is, but they're perfectly reasonable to work with, and they're not shooting my blues or anything. I mean,
to be clear, the way it was described to me was that they did not have the same blue lists as other members of the Imperium, for instance, like the Bastion would have. Was the way it was described to me.
We do have our slight differences here and there. For example, in the Fountain Theater, the people who are residents in Fountain have a slightly different blue list. And then in Cloud Ring, there were a couple of friends of the Initiative that were kind of like had light blue standing to the group, but not the rest of us. And so we, when we became active in Cloud Ring and inexplicably a Keepstar appeared in 6RCQ, we then had to go in and match up some more light bluing because we, to try to match. No, there are times and places where we're not exactly the same. I mean, sometimes we look like a big, super hyper organized monolith, but that's mostly the front facade.
All right.
Well, I just put it in Twitch chat. Can't shoot the Russians. Which Russians? Those Russians? Okay, so the other Russians are okay to shoot? Yes, but no. Ask Marana.
Marana is the chief diplomat for Imperium.
Yeah, like this whole situation, I would love to have more people to talk to. And indeed, if I have said something, or if I'm sure Hugh has said something where we've got something wrong, or maybe we misinterpreted someone, or we've been given biased information, we legitimately want to know. Like, this story is super interesting to us, and we think it'd be super interesting to the rest of EVE if they could hear it. So definitely keep a look at least on Dotland for Sov changes, on Zkill for big fights that are surely going to be happening. Or not on the scale that we're seeing in the other half of the map, but certainly interesting fights be happening in Ethereum Reach cache later on, most certainly. Great Wildlands, I think that's sort of calming down. basically groups are in the cleanup phase. They're clearing up structures, waiting to see where groups are going to fall under new allegiances. Basically, because Ebola was a big cohesive factor between all the smaller organizations in Great Wildlands. So now you have to see, does that cohesion stay, or do people start fighting each other again? We'll find out. These are all places to keep an eye on if you're getting bored of slideshow heavy tie-dye Baltac fleets over in the West.
Well, thanks very much, guys. I have a question. It seemed to me that the Ebola was very much the bad guys in the area. Like they were kind of bullies that were picking on a bunch of little groups, and those little groups got together and fought back and defeated and actually fractured the people that were gate camping everywhere and kind of shutting things down. Is that a fair portrayal of that?
I'd push back on you, but that's legitimately like what they wanted to be. As I understand it from talking to people, that was their persona. That's what they liked being. Abrasive. They liked being hard to work with.
Oh, okay. So that was their style.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's neat to see the little guys get together and actually defend themselves. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that we don't see that often, but always hope for is like, hey, if you're being picked on, collect some friends and fight back. Isn't that right, Dirk? Something like that? Does that make sense?
That's the way it's always supposed to work out, right? I mean, or you can just...
Well, you don't see it that often.
Just go on being oppressed. I mean...
Usually you see these guys clear out because they're like, yeah, we can't.
Well, I think the biggest factor in this situation was that Ebola sent mails to everyone. Like, the majority of the time when a large group intends to clear out a region, for example, they're just going to go one by one, focus on one single group, then move on to the next, then move on to the next. These groups usually fight between each other. So if you see someone you fight with getting steamrolled, you're usually not going to go try and help them. But because Ebola went and sent mails to everyone knew, hey, as soon as this group falls, I'm next on the chopping block, so I'd better help. That if Ebola hadn't sent those mails, this probably would not have turned out with a coup, and certainly would not have turned out where Ebola is losing money moons.
Yeah, very, very good analysis there. And the term "money moons" reminds me of that song "Money Moves." So every time you say it, I think of what's her name? That's a singer. Somebody tell me somebody cooler than me. Tell me in chat there. Okay, that's really cool. Hugh, do you have anything else on news out there that's not related to the major war that we've covered for the last 4 weeks?
Not particularly. Everyone apart from the Eastern conflict seems to be sort of tied into one way or the other. I do know that Tenerife is kind of like the main front in the Southern conflict, and that Impasse and Imensi seems to be quieting down a bit. But other than that, business as usual, I think. Lots of iHubs being burnt, some keep stars being blown up, but...
Can I ask you a question, Hugh, about the conflict in Ethereum Reach?
Yeah, by all means.
So before the station patch hit, it seemed like Prothean was very much like on the brink of going away because they had lost control of just about all of the stations in Ethereum Reach. Was it not the groups who are currently in the Ethereum Breach Coalition who took those stations? Was it other groups?
I accidentally, you can cut out for a sec there, so sorry if I spoke over you. My understanding, actually, is I think Snuffed Out may have traded some faction Fortizars back to Prothean, but I'm not sure.
Okay. The other question is, like, the groups besides Snuffed Out who took stations, who were they? Were they the current people fighting for Ethereum Reach, or were they other groups who just came in to grab the stations and then left?
I think it was mostly Unspoken Alliance managed to get them. So the people who are still in the region leading Ethereum Breach Coalition.
So then has anything like changed tactically that now it seems Prothean Alliance is better able to defend than they were able to defend their stations?
I'm not sure. So I'm not a sort of senior FC or military analyst. Currently, I think it seems, from the kind of BRs I've seen, that Prothean Alliance is losing most of the major battles, but Ethereum Breach isn't trying to take space at a particularly rapid rate. So, because, I mean, the thing actually I didn't mention is it's worth bearing in mind just how small these entities are. The entirety of the Ethereum Breach Coalition has under 1,000 active players. In fact, probably more like about 500 active players. Prothean has about 250, 300 active players. So, I mean, either side could take the entire region in theory, but I don't think they do much with it. So that's kind of something that has to play into that understanding.
Well, I hope you're not getting those stats from Dotland because it's having some hiccups lately, right?
Yeah, I think was it Hard Knocks probably woke up surprised at that.
Yeah.
No, that's from Zekiel.
Yeah, I think Triumvirate had disbanded according to Dotland, so we wrote them and they're like, nope, we paid the bills. So, and now we've seen other goofs happening, and it's just, I guess, the ESI stuff, the stuff that links them to the databases inside of EVE Online are having hiccups occasionally.
Yeah, I guess so. It would be a very dark day if I think that if Zekiel, Dotlan, and BR. Space were to go down. If all those three fail.
I don't know. What about taking them down on purpose so that people take the heat off of all that measurement, statistics?
I think it would be a very different game if Zekiel and killboards didn't become a thing. Like, the ISK war would be meaningless. The fact that someone ships for cheaper than someone else is only a matter of production then. It's not a matter of it looks bad on your alliance. Plus, it's a massive intel tool.
Yes.
I do not understand, apart from, like, in Noir, we had the killboard because that was our advertisement. We could show potential clients that and say, hey, listen, this is our work. But if you're a group just trying to accomplish any goal, and you've got your API and Zekiel you're basically giving your enemies free intel. I don't understand.
Yeah, I've actually thought of that. I mean, we had the guys that run the ESI from CCP on, and they're like, "Well, what would you think of this about killboards?" And I retorted, "What about no killboard at all?" And we were all like, what would happen? Because it's a big motivator, right? Like, that's how people need to measure their progress in some way. At the same time, it's also
super useful as a utility for those alliances that offer ship replacement policy, SRP.
Right.
Because you can link that in as part of your submission, and you can semi-automate the process of paying their claims. It's almost like running an insurance company.
Well, you can pull that out of in-game too. I mean, but I guess if it wasn't in-game, then or if we didn't have these other sites out there, then we wouldn't need it in-game either. Is that what you're saying? I mean, because as long as it's in-game, that means somebody can create a site using that in-game stuff.
I'm just saying we use it for multiple things at this point, and it would be a bummer if it went away. Did we just have a technical hiccup with our screen?
There was Artemis. Blew up, but we'll get him back if he can make it back.
Oh, he's not, broadcasting from Ethereum Reach from the, from the war zone,
is he? Right. Oh, that's a good.
He's not broadcasting live from the Matterall Broadcast Network tower.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, because that's. I mean, the dream is to say like that we have a news broadcast in the game, right? To put little trappings of RP around it, and a part of that was broadcasting from a tower in a certain empire region, and to conduct the show like we're actually in that tower, like actually turn on the characters that we play and put them in there, so you have the duality of virtual life meets real life. And I always thought that was really cool and something that we wanted to do, and that's why we named the Onin Keepstar the Matterall Broadcast Tower or Matterall, network. That was the idea.
We're going to get this right. Repeat after me. Onenin.
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 And Onenin. Like, how do you say that one? It's terrible.
Not a noonin. It's not onin. Onenin.
I think a noonin.
It's like a mini game, some of these names.
Yeah, so what we want to end the show with is the Imperium's desire to attack Onenin and maybe eventually Mela and destroy those keep stars. It turns out that one of those keep stars is I'm a part owner of, and so it caused some consternation on my part. So this attack came. I don't know, Dirk, you were there and you described it on Open Comms, which is pretty funny. Let's go back to that.
Well, I mean, let's go back to what do you have the video? No. Well, it was funny because we were sitting around and talking in Station's Discord, just talking about whatever shit we were talking about. You and McLeod, I think, was there, and Brisk was there, and all of a sudden you just sort of like pop in with oh, I think my Keepstar is being attacked, and at first it didn't sound real, and then we're all trying to figure out, well, do any of us have any characters up there, and Onenin was a place that I had always used as a warehouse, from my time in the north and everything. So I did happen to have an alt there, and flew him over and literally in system. And then Brisk was jumping in an interceptor to fly over. And I think you were trying to log in at the time or whatever, but I went over and said, oh yeah. Oh, it's definitely being shot, bro.
Oh yeah.
And I even tried to type in local. It's like, hey, I'm a friend of Matterall, who's a friend of the Mittani. You are hereby requested to cease and desist.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that.
And I pulled my usual diplomatic finesse when I entered system and said, stop, ceasefire. It didn't work.
That didn't work either.
No, but I did jump in the Keepstar and fired off to, what are they called? I guess they're actually called Doomsdays from the Keepstar.
What are they called?
Well, I think they have a special name that's different.
I think you had to find the button. No, you were going through a bit of how do I operate a Keepstar?
Where's the buttons? Where's the lasers? But I did.
Oh my God, Brisk and Doc. Oh, okay, all right. Hold on, I got to work with I got to work with my settings here. Yeah. I think we're rolling up some YouTube videos or something on how to man a Keepstar.
Well, it was like, what initiative has offices here? You're out of here. Where's the flush button? Well, but that didn't.
And just to go back, I think that the only Imperium alliance that. What was it? Just goons who were the only ones who weren't allowed to dock in it? Because it seems like other Imperium alliances were in fact not banned from that Keepstar at the same time.
I can talk about this now because it's kind of over. This era is over, and that is, if you look back on it, the Keepstars were funded, and this is the beginning of the story. These Keepstars were going to create a trade network that started from the north and went south, and it was going to encompass a web around Empire space that people could supply in, which on its face was a noble idea. The immediate problem was the only guy that could finance this and had the will to finance it was also the same guy that financed the Casino War or the World War B effort or the displacement of goons in the north in 2017 or 16, I forget. And so immediately these things are not seen as benign. They're seen as midpoints for the powers that took over the north, which would be NCPL, Guardians of the Galaxies, etc. Even though they don't claim them, it still seems that they use them to get around. So it created a really big problem. And the problem of trust was overcome by giving these Keepstars and the whole network over to a guy that everybody could trust, which was Kriba, who's a longtime player who built a lot of software a lot of third-party software for EVE players. And so everybody loved him because he built stuff that a lot of players used. And he built it and made it public for everybody to use. And he didn't pick any sides, etc. But he was also someone who was incredibly wealthy in the game and could bankroll trust by covering a miscommunication or something with his own money if needed. He was like an insurance policy when you were trading something really valuable. So old schoolers regard him as like the standard for trust. Like if we don't trust each other, we can at least trust this guy. So let's put him in charge. And that's what they did with the Keepstars. But he basically decided that that was enough time. He'd done it for a year and he was either going to take a break or he was not interested in doing this anymore. So it went to the people that had formed to guard these things militarily, which was Ghost Legion. And the leader of Ghost Legion is a former PL, former NC member, but he's not in any of those groups anymore. And also, I believe he ran DRF and Drone Control Unit, very much a third entity in the North, power structure, because he was with DRF, he wasn't with the North. But he had the history with them, and he had the friendly relations with them, and so from the Imperium's point of view, Fafer was basically just a crony of the North, and he was in charge of these keep stars, and so they were very much targets. So from that perspective, you have Goon Swarm or the Imperium on a roll. They've just basically, after a couple failed attempts, one in Hanoken where they used a bunch of dreads and they got all annihilated. Harkonnen, yeah, thank you. Then they came back and assaulted a 9 TAC 4, the Keep Star, which was the biggest fight Eve has ever seen. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records, the biggest fight in video games. And that was a stalemate because really couldn't get past the amount that the server could take. 6,000 people in fighting all at once in one place was just too much for servers. So those two things were not successes, but not necessarily failures. Well, maybe the first one was. So when they came back this time in the North, when Pandemic Legion decided to enter the war in the South, they came down, weakening the North because Pandemic Legion is a strength point for the North. That was immediately reacted to by the Imperium, who had made allies with the people that PL was coming to fight, Test Alliance. And so the Imperium attacked the North because now they were weaker than they were. And when they got up there, they were able to win fights to put down their forward operating base, Keep Star, I think in 6R. And then they were able to assault, for the most part, the North with one battle actually being unplugged because this nobody knew that you could still put up a jammer if the iHub was still alive. And this will be important later. So instead, the Imperium decided to take out X-47, which was NC's Keep Star, which was a bold move because you're hitting the major force in the North, and you're hitting them directly and taking out their staging Keep Star. And that was a successful attack in the armor timer, there's 3 timers. The shield one was quick, and that happens all the time. But the armor timer was a big bloody battle. About 40 Titans died. Is it 40? 20 on each side, or maybe it was more than that. And then the final timer was decisively for the Imperium. And so they destroyed that, and NC had to back off. So
destroyed the Pandemic Horde Keep Star over in
Kanaka. It wasn't Horde, it was Waffles.
It was Waffles.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, actually, I was coming to that. And so they also took out Shadow Cartel's Keep Star, and they took out Waffles' Keep Star, and those went relatively undefended because at that point, there was an irresistible force attacking these things. If Goon Swarm and the Imperium wanted to, they could put 400 Titans on the field, and nothing could survive that unless you put 400 Titans on the field and then made the servers collapse or hiccup But even then, X-47 proved that even then, Imperium could possibly win a fight where servers were jammed up and having a hard time. So those two went undefended. And then Oninen, say it for me one time, Dirk. Oninen is slated for destruction, as is Mela. And these are, again, this whole campaign is built for a few things. If you look at the Imperium's point of view, they want to force PL back up into the North, relieving pressure on the southern front of this war. And by doing that, they're putting a lot of pressure on the North, causing PL to have to run back to help North stay alive, kind of thing. So that's one objective. The other objective is a war of destruction that Mittania's promised 2 years ago, that you guys may think you won the casino war, but we'll take our time and we'll get our revenge. And so you saw the collapse of CO2. They've now reconstituted, which is very interesting. But you also saw the collapse of EFCON, these were considered enemies of the Imperium. And you've seen them come up north and now start to assault Guardians of the Galaxy and NC, and to also help test counter PL. These are all enemies of the Imperium from their point of view. Another enemy of the Imperium, of course, is the guy that financed the Casino War, NETC owner Lenny, even though he was zapped out of existence by CCP, which banned him for RMT. He denied that, but he was gone and has been gone ever since. When he left, his friends kept the NETC circuit going. And one of those friends was C4, who did Care for Kids. And it was a charity, and he named the Mela Keepstar Care for Kids. And it was, and he was a harsh critic of the Imperium, and the Imperium regarded his charity as a front for something else. And it was probably just mismanagement, but it definitely, it definitely put an X and a target on Mela. It also put a target on Onan. So they're in the area. Onan is not very far from where they're operating. They've already killed 2 low-sec Keepstars without any defense happening. And so they make a move on Onan, and that was led not by Asher, but by, it looked like Merkelchen. He's the leader of Karma Fleet. And so they basically put it in shield rather quickly. And at that point, it was wait and see how Northern Coalition would regard this thing. Were they going to defend it? Were they going to form up and say, okay, we're drawing the line. We got to save that Keepstar. It borders our territory and we use it to trade supers, let's say. Now, I'm not saying they actually do, but that would be like what people were expecting them to react. Are they going to save it because they need it, or are they going to leave it because it's not theirs? And pretty much the answer came down. Oh, by the way, Merkelchen was not the FC. I'm getting corrected. He was just in the fleet. I don't know. I just targeted him for Doomsday, which was a lot of fun.
He was the name you recognized.
He was the most famous guy on the field, so I zapped him. But he is not the FC. I don't know who actually FC'd that, but our friend Apple Pear was salivating at the prospect of destroying the Keepstar, so it might have been him. I don't know.
What was funny in Talking in Stations that night was, like, as this was going on, right, we started to get more and more people jumping into the chat channel, or jumping into the voice comms channel, and one of them eventually was Apple Pear, who yes, could do nothing but salivate over the fact of this thing gonna die.
Right.
But, like, is it gonna die?
So that's the next phase of the story. The idea is there's impending doom on these Keepstars. Now, here's the transformation part that I think is important. NETC was gone when Lenny got zapped by CCP, right? He's gone from the picture. The guys that are holding the place held it with the name through Kriba, which was a neutral party and respected by everyone. And they weren't really existing to do anything strategic. But some of the baggage that came with NETC stuck with the new owners, and that was that the goons couldn't dock there. The Imperium could, except Snuff and goons could not. And that was something that was not, I would say it was not wise, but it was also inevitable, because when you have a superstructure that close to the North space, they're not going to be okay with an open port. And by open port, I mean free port. And Freeport is a whole idea that we need to discuss, because it's not a free port. This was an open port, a public port. It doesn't mean that it's closed to only our guys and the guys that we like. It means it's open to everybody, except closed to people that we cannot possibly have here. And there's a difference there.
It's a little bit like how Praviblock operates in a way with you have to be on their bad list. What is it called again?
Not red, don't shoot.
Yeah. It's a little bit like the difference between not red, don't shoot and public, I think.
Well, I think the original intent, and going back, I mean, people kind of need to recognize sort of the timing of when these things happened, right? Remember that Casino War B took place at kind of the intersection of Citadels coming into play in the first place, right? So you had Lenny and that casino crew that was funding that side of things, or helping to fund that side of things, before Citadels even came into existence, and then the Citadels came into existence while there was still some overlap there. And that's when the idea of them creating a trade network came up. And there was a whole bunch of debate out there about whether or not these things should exist in the first place and all that kind of stuff, but whatever. But then you're right. Lenny got zapped in relation to, I believe it was real money trading or something along those lines that had to do with fallout from the whole casinos thing and everything.
His money was tangled up with money from real money traders. And so whether he was or wasn't, we don't know, but his money was tied up in there, and that by extension he got zapped.
So he was gone. He was gone from the picture. Like the NETC network eventually never came to fruition. There were a couple of things that were put up out there or also absorbed into it, as with the Care for Kids, Miley Keepstar, and things like that. But where we sat at the time that you had your name on it, it wasn't really part of the NETC anymore. I mean, this thing had gone through a couple different transitions. The way I sort of put it to you the other night was attacking this over NETC is like, I don't know, coming and burning down my house because, 10 years ago before I owned it, somebody got murdered there and you're still mad about it. But whatever. Yeah. I mean, like, the case can still be made that this thing sitting where it is and all, deserves to die. Fine. Yeah. But now you've done something to keep it from dying.
Yeah. Well, to describe what they actually are now, to bring some clarity, is they were NETC, but that's gone. Crib is gone. They were given to Pfaffer, and Pfaffer's idea was to say, hey, look, these are open ports as much as they can be. So the initiative could park there, Tissue could park there, and have an office there. TNT could, and other enemies of the North could park there, just not one that could constitute a large threat. And in that sense, they were open ports, and the idea was these are city states, right? You plop them down and you let people use them, and it's not to make money, because I think these things barely break even. Just paying for all the stuff is huge amount of fuel, huge amount, and people usually just use them to go shopping in other places. But there's some stuff that sells there, so it was kind of self-sustaining, but it's not like a master plan of a network that was going to make so much money for them in the long run or anything like that. It was more like when you're done at the game, when you've played the game as long as you have, when you've acquired as much history and wealth, at a certain point you endow things, right? That's what people do in real life too. And it's a sense of building legacy, not necessarily for your name, but just for a cause, just for something bigger than you are. And that's what these were. Now, I try to make that case in an article on the Imperium News, and these things were called Sanctuary Keepstars. And there was a whole list of the doctrine or the belief system, and there were 3 Sanctuary Keepstars. And we even had a show about it with Pfaffer and Max Singularity and myself. And that's when I decided I was going to get involved with that and try to donate money towards it and try to be a part of that sort of thing. And so to us, yeah, they were already separate, totally different. NETC was a memory. But you can't deny the fact that Imperium didn't see it that way, because NC could still use them as a waypoint, a midpoint to get to Syndicate, to bomb, initiative down there. And so we're kind of stuck because the locations were bad. And it was it was just something that was inherited that we just had to work with, right? It's like somebody buys you a house and it's on an island. Well, the problems of being on an island came with the house. You can't change that. So as they're getting attacked, the idea was to try to save them. So I did, and I talked to Imperium's leader, the Mittani, who I actually have a close personal relationship with. I'm just kidding. But I did. It was kind of funny, right? It's like, the Keepstar's being attacked, and then it was just like keyboard. Like, oh, you just heard the keyboard going crazy because I was writing Fafr and writing Mittani and talking to Lady Scarlet and just trying to try to figure out where we were on saving these things, or were they going to be destroyed like Kanaka and Shadow Cartel's Keepstar were destroyed. And so that went back and forth. And so the idea was that how can we destroy these? How can we keep them alive? And some deals were made. So between, it's not just that Mittani decided to spare them or Asher decided to spare them. It was more like, if you can sufficiently destroy them in a way that works for us, then we'll let you have the wreckage, And so the idea was, okay, well, if we move them, all their rigs get destroyed, and that'll be the penalty of like the NETC stain that's on it. And that will obliterate NETC's, connection to these things, and they can be used elsewhere as the same mission. And the mission's the important thing. And that was really why I went into save them mode, was because if a Keepstar can just be wiped out by whoever decides to wipe it out, then you have no mission. Like, there's no Sanctuary Keepstar. Nobody's going to trust it to keep their stuff in. But if you can prove that these things can survive a wave during war, then the mission has hope. Like, I'm going to put it in there because I know that if war comes, there'll be a way to negotiate its safety and usage. And the second thing is to not make it a stake in any war by putting it in a place that's just smarter. So that's kind of where it was. A deal was reached. Fafr generously said, yeah, that's something that, I can live with. The North was like, we won't interfere. And so then that was where we are now. So the Sanctuary Keepstar mission continues. There is definitely a lot to be done. And I think in a month or so, or hopefully by 6 months from now, you'll see that the Sanctuary Keepstar is not only relocated and working, but that there's more of them. And the last thing I'll say about it, Sanctuary Keepstar is not something that's mine or Fafer's or Max. It's more like a league of people who have Keepstars that don't want to just close them off to their own guys, that want to put them out as public facilities. So if you want to join that, buy a Keepstar and put it down, or a corporation or anybody can own it, as long as you can pretty much leave it an open port and not get too intertwined in politics. That league is open for people to join. And there's the story.
Well, I mean,
but
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one question: is Basgarin staying? Is Basgarin staying in Basgarin?
Basgarin is totally safe and won't move.
Okay. And then one comment on your safety of upholding what a Sanctuary Keepstar is. It is moving, though. So, like, it has failed. Can we recognize this?
NETC's design failed, not Sanctuary's design. We're stuck with some.
What, put them in a particularly inconvenient location so that they don't have to be moved again?
Yes, you take them out of, the idea is to stay away from any border, like always leave a midpoint between nullsec, so that a power that lives in nullsec won't see that as something they have to fear or control. And if you can do that, then you can negotiate, like, look, we're not going to allow people to jump supers in your territory because we're at least one midpoint away from you. And our mission is totally different, and these things are totally open. You can use them too. And so the only way these things are going to survive is not by doing what I try to do and jump in front of it and say, stop, don't attack this thing. That doesn't work.
I think you said please. I don't think you said.
Oh, you're right. No. Whatever. But the idea is to show them their own self-interest, and then hope that there's enough there that they decide that, what, we don't really need it. It's just kill mails are very, very sexy, and having a Keepstar kill mail, it makes you look good, I guess. But is it worth knocking off a local market that you might use? That's really the only way I can think to defend these things. It's not what Dirk hates, which is a charity shield or or name tanking or any of that. It's more like, can these things exist in this world because there's enough people interested in saving them? There are more people interested in saving them than interested in destroying them. That's really the calculation.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to go to was, yes, obviously I've disagreed with the idea of charity tanking or name tanking or anything like that. Like, if you can't defend the structure you put up in EVE Online, then it has every right to die by somebody out there who thinks it deserves to die. And nobody should feel, oh gosh, can't attack that one because that's so and so's, or it's some charity related thing or anything like that. But there's a difference between a trade network and your idea of sanctuary keepstars. And it's my understanding your idea of a sanctuary keepstar was fallout from bait fortizars, and people will be unlikely to put up bait keepstars because of just the cost of them. So therefore you wanted to go the keepstar route for the sanctuary thing. But the problem is that if you put it in a place that is, I don't know, nobody cares about it anymore from the attack it side, is anybody going to care about it from the use it anyway side?
That's a good question. These things can be used in two ways. They can be used as waypoints, or they can be used as local markets. And that's something we're wrestling with when we look at it is what's the best way? We can just pick one up and drop it. We can buy a new one and drop it in Genesis, in the middle of Genesis, and let an ecosystem evolve around it, which is kind of cool. That's totally legitimate use of these things. Another way is to put it near a hub, like near Amar or Jita, and say, well, this is a place where jump freighters can land. Even though there are stations that you can land in low-sec near Jita, those stations can be tricky. You can see that some systems have a ton of Astra houses because people only land on the stuff they trust, which is their own stuff. They don't land on anything that's possibly neutral. So to advertise that you're friendly and open and public port means nothing if you can be killed and counterfeited. It totally erases the idea. So the CCP is not going to save this. So players have to save this concept of an open port. And the only way to do that is to outmaneuver the tricksters out there by making it so expensive that it's not worth their effort to try to, trick people. And they can't overcome a keepstar. Putting it down is too risky. It costs a lot, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a player-made solution for a player problem of tricksters nailing jump freighters as they try to get to the market.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm sorry. For anything other than supers, okay, there are plenty of freaking free ports in low sec within range of high sec. I mean, they're called NPC stations.
Trustworthy, though.
They're called NPC stations, and they are completely trustworthy.
No.
Yes.
They cannot work. NPC stations do not work because you can get your jump freighters volleyed on them by super capitals. And if you don't think that is a thing, then just go check out Pornstachio something. I forget the name of the super pilot who does it literally on a daily basis. Using NPC stations to move your jump freighters is a way to lose jump freighters to supers. That's just how it is in today's EVE Online. You need to use citadels.
Except you don't have the tether. I mean, like you don't have instant.
You dock.
Why don't you dock in the station?
It's the undocking from the station, then warping, which is the issue. Whereas if you're on a citadel, you're tethered into warp.
Yeah, and I learned this recently, if you undock a jump freighter and you hit jump on the gate, it's just one jump, you think you can make it. But if you're not pointed at it directly, your ship has to turn. And once it's turned, you can't redock unless you stop your movement and then redock. So you're like two actions away while they're targeting you and blowing you up. And that's a big, that little detail there is a big deal. So you should undock, you should align to the gate. And because you can dock, if you're just aligning, you can dock. But if you say jump, you cannot dock until you stop your movement. So there's tricks like that. And people obviously are getting zapped unless they own.
They're not tricks. That's just the way you do it.
Okay,
that's the
strategy.
That's the way we did it for a decade before Citadels came into existence.
You're right. That's good gameplay. That's the merchant's gameplay, right? How to survive in dangerous situations shows the skill of a merchant bringing supplies. That's very legitimate. But yeah, so the idea then is not to say it's not to save people, but it's to put something down that's essentially an NPC station that allows people to trade commerce. But the other use of it is totally legit, to put it down somewhere remote and say, this is open for you guys to stack supplies and for merchants to sell their goods in it and stuff like that. The network itself will probably never make money, but it may sustain itself if I'm looking at the numbers right.
Try it and see what kind of emergent behavior occurs. Eve is a lot of experimentation.
Right? Like that's probably an interesting use of it. It's just to see what the behavior is, I think. Dirk, I know you're a wealthy man. You've been playing a long time, building stuff. You should become a. You should keep really good stats on who uses it and what they use it for. And at the end of the year, you should do a report on here's what the usage is of a particular Keepstar in a particular location. This much occurred from jump clones. This much occurred from market usage. We use this many fuel blocks. They cost a fortune. Just go through all that stats. There are plenty of stat nerds in this game that would eat that up. Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, and that's the story so far. It's chapter 1. There's definitely more to come this year, and I think eVegas has just let out that if you want to make a presentation at eVegas, the sign up sheet is out, and you can put together a presentation for your fellow players. And so this might be what I throw in the hat. Sanctuary Keepstar is the concept, and wrestling with a lot of the issues that are attached to it.
Yeah, excuse me, I just linked out there the thing about if you want to do player advertisements, kind of like the ads that we saw during the AT and things like that. You can put that out there as well as if your alliance or corp or whatever wants to pitch in swag to the swag bags, how to go about doing that. And then I will now link the link for speaker submissions, which I really wish somebody would do a speaker submission on, why you shouldn't be in watching speaker submissions. You should be out making friends and talking with people and just socializing. But
I'd like to take this time to put in an official request for another presentation by the Space Pope's alter ego.
Yeah. I mean, those are always really good.
Those are fantastic.
Yep, those are definitely ones worth seeing.
Yeah. Now, I said that I may throw this in as an offering, but I don't expect to be picked because I've spoken 2 out of the last 3 eVegases. So I think they will kind of probably pick other people, fresher faces. But the Pope, I think, would always be welcome back. His stuff's well attended and liked. And he works for NASA. All right. So that's it. I can't believe that I made a really interesting and exciting topic pretty boring, but there it was. And
it was fun that night because we were all laughing. I'm like, at first, I'm sitting there going, "Oh, is this just kind of a feint, right?" And then it's like, no, this is like the real deal, bro. You better start lining up some dominoes out there for how you're going to figure this out.
I was going to say, Matterall, you're in the unique position where just about everyone else in EVE, their stake in this story was potentially getting on a Keepstar kill mail, and you have just foiled that. That would have fixed the efficiency on hundreds of kill boards, and you have ruined it with diplomacy.
Yeah, when this began to go down, I was already talking in Imperium News Discord about how Matterall was going to be hosting the coverage of the Armor Timer on Tuesday night, and then we were trying to figure out when the final timer would be in relation to today's show.
Yeah, it would have been right about now.
We had it all planned out for content for the week, and you screwed it up.
Yeah, totally short-circuited that. It was going to be a live stream from the seat of the Keepstar, defending itself. Wouldn't have lasted that long. But yeah, I definitely ruined a lot of people's kill board. But I think in the end they'll be happy to be able to, have a free port somewhere. Not a free port, but a public port. A free port's a different concept, by the way, right? A free port is you open it to everyone, and all you do is collect taxes that are, whatever, and that's that's pretty much a free port. And if bad, if people shoot at it, so be it. If people are using it to ruin other people's or griefing's lives and stuff like that, that's not anything that you judge over or anything like that.
We're sort of in this potential middle ground right now, where within LowSec itself, right, we've got this mixture of NPC stations as well as Citadel type structures out there, right? To where there is still a choice. I don't know if the end game here is that even in LowSec, we will see the abandonment of stations at some point, because then these things become a lot trickier, right?
CCP has said their end goal is everything is player destructible. So
I really question.
May come true.
Yeah, I mean, I really question whether they'll go that route in LowSec for a variety of reasons, and I think that we're still a long way from that. But right now we are in kind of that interim period of the mix of the two. We did have the mix of the two out in nullsec for a while there, right, until recently. But even those were nullsec stations that were locked down, except to access lists. And then here in LowSec, it's still the NPC stuff. So we'll see where this kind of plays out. It's not really a super big deal right now. If they do move towards getting rid of NPC stations in LowSec at some point, then it becomes a much bigger issue.
Can I ask really quickly, Matterall, you made the distinction when telling your story about the difference between a free port and an open port. And now you've made the distinction between a free port and a sanctuary. So my question is, the main difference there is that they had to be open ports as a result of the NETC network to please the powers that be. In their new locations, will they also be open ports? Will there be sort of a you can't dock here shortlist? Or will they be true free ports in commonly known sense?
There'll be a lot more like free ports. There will be a complete blank slate. So Goons will be able to dock. Snuff will be able to dock. We'll start there.
So you're saying if Snuff come and shoot it again, then they can't dock anymore?
I don't know. I don't think so. It depends. It depends on the situation. But Freeport is just you drop it down and let anybody use it and see. It doesn't matter what happens. And this is not that. I mean, the thing needs to protect itself in some way. So that you may see people eventually get on the persona non grata, but initially it's a total blank slate. Good question. And then we can finally get rid of any of the stigma that's attached to NETC, which would be really good because you can't say this is good for you if you're blocked off the list, That's kind of it. But yeah, so up our show this week. Thank you guys for hanging around, and thanks for a great party, Carneros.
My pleasure.
We'll do it again soon. I drove Gobbins, by the way. He had a great time. And the whole day was pretty good. And then well, I guess I can't say that because it's personal. But then something really cool happened at the end where, can you put that picture up there? There you go. He didn't say anything, but it was his birthday.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he didn't want to make a fuss, but it was his birthday. So that was kind of cool.
Aw.
All right.
Had a cake for him.
Yeah, that would have been cool. Something like that would have been nice. And there's Kenneth Feld there on the bottom right, if you can see that video. Man, awesome, guys. It was nice talking to you this morning. Dirk, Carneros, Artemis, Hugh, appreciate you guys showing up. We will call that a week here, and we will see you next week on Talking in Stations.